Yo, how's it going, YouTube? And in today's video, I will be answering a question for Mr. Al. I don't exactly remember his entire screen name because I have been in the transition of moving and doing a whole bunch of stuff. So I do apologize that I wasn't able to get this out to you a lot sooner. But again, I've just been in transition. I still don't even have all my equipment or even a setup. So this is going to be real raw and just, like I say, off the dome. So here we go. Alright, my G, so I'm gonna try and do this as like best as I can with what I got here. So you have to excuse me, I don't even have my mat on me, which is unfortunate. But I'm going to use Raid You as the example, and then from there I'll just kind of sort of give you the idea of what it is you want to do, when you want to do it. You had asked me basic questions as when it is I should be attacking, when it is I should be defending, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to grab some cards and set some things up. So let's say you got a couple of scenarios here. I'd really rather play out a hand to kind of sort of give you a good explanation, because if I play out a hand, I think that I could give you a better explanation as opposed to just playing cards or just throwing them down. But I'm trying to make these as visible as possible. So when it comes to when attacking life, when attacking your opponent, when attacking all of that, that's low-key something that you have to determine at the start of the game and whatever deck it is that you're playing against. So for instance, if you're playing against like a nail, then it doesn't make, for example, if you're playing against a nail, in that match in particular, and keep in mind you're going to have to take this information and apply it as it is relevant to each deck that you're playing, because there is no set way to play One Piece, seeing as it's such a diverse game and there are so many different decks that do so many different things. There is no collective playing style. There's just an idea on what to do and when to do it. And when it comes to when to attack and when to go for life and when to go for board, it really depends on the board state, your life, your hand, and everything like that. So if you have a real big hand size and you know you can defend yourself, you got good board presence, then you should be going for life. If you have good hand size, good board presence, and a healthy amount of life, you should be going for life. If you have poor hand size, poor board presence, then depending on the stage of the game, then you should also be focusing life, because again, you don't have many resources to keep you alive, so you're just trying to kill your opponent as quickly as you can. If you do not have the resources to defend yourself, your only option is to push at them. It's kind of like when you hear Fortnite players say, even when you're at low health, push. It's the kind of sort of that same kind of concept in One Piece. When you're at low health, your best option is to push. Sometimes defending yourself is it, and sometimes it isn't. It really is just dependent on your situation. Like if your opponent has 5 creatures on board and you have 6 cards in hand and 2 life, and your opponent has 6 cards in hand and 1 life, and you have 4 creatures on board, then no, you should not be trying to go for their creatures on board. You should be trying to go for their life, especially if they only have 1. But if your opponent has multiple creatures on board and healthy life size, healthy hand size, healthy life, then you want to mitigate their ability to do damage to you, which means you want to get rid of the creatures that they have on board. So again, it depends on the health of your opponent. If your opponent is at a healthy state in the game, then you want to start swinging at their creatures and removing their creatures whenever available. But if your opponent is not in a healthy state of the game, then you just want to make sure you're swinging at life. Now when you're playing against a certain opponent and you just want to reduce their hand size, then you need to focus, and so there's certain instances where you attack your opponent's characters and they will want to keep those characters because they'll want to use those characters to help them push for game or put them in a more advantageous position to push for game. So you want to recognize when you're in the position where it's not good for you to push for game, where if you give up too many resources, you always have to think about your resources and what you're giving up to your opponent when you are swinging at your opponent. Because if you blind swing into your opponent and they have 3 creatures and you only have 1, then you have to give up a lot of resources to protect that 1 creature if it's a 5,000 creature. And if it's bigger, then obviously you won't have to give up as many resources. Your opponent has to use more resources. But anytime that you have to swing at something that is over 5,000, you have to make an investment into that swing. and you have to determine if you have enough Dawn to make that investment to try and get rid of that creature. And keep in mind that if it doesn't cost your opponent more than 2 cards to save a creature, they are more than likely going to save that creature. So if you're swinging at something that you absolutely want off the board, or if you absolutely want your opponent's hand size down because you know they have a large creature that they want to save, or they know they have a creature that gives them great benefit they want to save, pressure that creature. So like for instance, if my opponent has a Kuzan on the board, I know my opponent's going to want to keep that Kuzan alive because I know that Kuzan is going to help them for the next turn. So I'm going to put a lot of emphasis on swinging at that Kuzan because I know that my opponent is more than likely going to put a lot of resources into keeping it alive, especially if that Kuzan helps for a strategy later on in the game. Now again, when it comes to hand size, if you notice that your opponent has 4 cards in their hand and you saw them search 2 cards and you know 2 of those cards is a 2,000, or you know 1 of those cards is a 9 counter and 1 of those cards is a 2,000, always keep that in mind. Always keep in mind what your opponent is searching. A lot of people play with mixed match cards, and what I mean by that is, so I am extremely guilty of this myself. As you can see, I have the arts of cards and I have like the regular arts of cards. So the biggest case, I'm trying to find one. All right, so as you can see here, this is actually a bad idea, and I don't recommend that you do this. I don't recommend that you flex like this with these in your deck unless you have a complete deck of one or the other. If you have a complete deck of all arts, then have a complete deck of all arts. If you have a complete deck of non-art arts, have a complete deck of non-art arts. Whenever you start to mix these in your deck, you are giving your opponent very clear information. So if I search this card to my hand, but then I pitch this card, I've given my opponent the knowledge that I have a non-counter in my hand because I pitched the card that they didn't see me get. So if I'm searching a card, I always want to make sure that card is the first card I'm getting out of my hand. So if I search this and I got 2 of these in my hand, I'm going to get rid of the one that my opponent saw me search and say, this is only for if you're playing with all arts and non-all arts in your deck. It's just something important to keep in mind because again, you're low-key giving away information to your opponent whenever you discard something that is the same but different from your other art, so you don't want to do that. I've been in plenty of games where my opponent has discarded something different from another card they have in their hand, letting me know, oh, you still have another 2K in your hand, or you still have another 1K in your hand because they chose to discard the other art instead of the art that they searched. So don't be that foolish, and that's another thing that you want to keep in mind because like I said, you always want to just be mindful. We're in a state of the game right now where searching is very heavy, where hand knowledge is very, very relevant. It's very present that you make sure that you are paying attention to what it is your opponent is searching, what it is they have in their hand. Like I said, when it comes to determining whether it is you should go for game or go for board, depends on the deck you're playing, depends on the resources they have and all that kind of jazz. Like I say, if you know that you're playing against a black deck that just recurs a lot of creatures, then don't go sweeping at the creatures if they're just going to keep bringing the creatures back. If you're playing against a green deck and you know that they're good with hand size, don't go swinging all heavily into their life if you know that they're just planning to defend themselves heavy at the end of the game and they're just collecting cards at this point. If you're playing against black, then you just need to be mindful of, your creatures are more than likely not going to stay on board. You're more than likely not going to get that swing in with that creature if you're trying to establish creatures for a purpose of using them aside from an on play or an immediate action. Then you should be heavily considerate at what you're doing when you're playing against black because again, black just knocks all your stuff off the board. So always keep that in mind when playing against blue or no, actually let me go into a nail because I know that nail can be a problem from some people. When you're playing against a nail, you kind of want to starve a nail. You want to use the nail strategy on a nail because it's the best way for you to win. You just want to starve them out until you're in position to be able to win out the game or just have enough swings to where they can't have enough resources in hand to defend themselves. But when it comes to, like I said, when it comes to all these things, when it comes to knowing when to, knowing all that, it is a certain intuition that you have to gain through playing. It's knowledge that you gain through playing the game. I can give you as much of my knowledge as possible without the practicality and without you taking the time out to acknowledge your own mistakes, acknowledge where you are wrong, acknowledge where you're making good mistakes, and acknowledge all that jazz. All this information is absolutely useless. You must accept that you might not be good at the game if you want to get good at the game. That's another thing that I want to emphasize to players is that don't be so arrogant as to believe that you're just the greatest one-piece player because you just can win a bunch. You're going to go to a regionals and get clapped up. So keep in mind that some sense of humility also goes a long way when playing this game, because I have lost many games out of arrogance or foolishness, and simply because of arrogance and or foolishness. That is something that gets a lot of One Piece players. It's something I've seen all throughout the game as I play. So again, that's something that you want to keep in mind. When it comes to managing your hand size and managing your resources, think one turn ahead. Always think one turn ahead. When you're playing this game, you are always trying to think one turn ahead. The reason why you're trying to think one turn ahead is because if you're thinking for turn, then when something happens that you do not have a plan or a course of action for, you're going to lose. You're going to lose because you're going to have to start eating your own resources. You're going to have to start putting more of your resources in keeping your creatures alive or keeping you alive because of poor choice in protecting creatures or poor choice in managing your resources. Manage your resources is very important because again, you want to plan your turn just one turn ahead. If you can plan your turn one turn ahead, like on your turn, you should be thinking about what you want to do in your next turn. Like if you watch one of my previous Reiju videos, I tell you in 2 turns I'm setting up for a judge turn. 2 turns from now, I knew 2 turns from now, from that point, that I was going to play a judge in 2 turns. So again, I knew what I wanted to do in 2 turns, and I knew what my potential of my opponent was in those 2 turns, and if it wanted to stop the plan that I had in 2 turns. And because it wasn't able to stop the plan that I had in 2 turns, I was able to execute said plan. But One Piece is a game where you want to think in terms like that, because if you aren't thinking like that, then again, you're only playing for the turn by turn, and that turn by turn it's not as good as going one more turn event. So if I know that, again, so I want to play an Ichiji on my 4-dawn turn, and I know that I'm going to do that on my 4-dawn turn, then I had to plan that out for my very next turn. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people lose this midway into the game, or at the start of the game, they're always conscious of this. You're always conscious of this at the start of the game, but when the game starts to progress, it seems like players just lose this consciousness and they just start acting all willy-nilly because, you know, you're reaching a certain point of I guess, anxiety and stress, because I know that, you know, you just kind of lose yourself, right? And especially when you're playing in high-level tournaments, you know, it can get to you. But the point of practicing, the point in learning and mastering and playing a deck, one deck over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, is that so you have mastery of it, so that when you go to a tournament, you're so confident in your ability to play that one deck that you will not have that sense of nervousness or that sense of like uneasiness, because again, playing one deck again 1 trillion times makes you really good at that deck. One of the things I notice about a lot of One Piece players is that they want to play so many different colors and so many different decks, and they spend so much time playing blue, yellow, green, red, black, blue, black, or whatever the case may be. You spend so many time playing these different color combinations, you don't really have a time to master one color combination or just one deck in general. So find a leader that you really, really, really enjoy, and a leader that you really like, and hammer that leader. I mean, play that leader until you can't play that leader anymore. Play that leader so much that people are sick of tired of you playing that leader, for real, because it is your best bet for evolving your ability to play this game. And I can give you a bunch of more nuggets and a bunch more knowledge, but honestly, I'd have to make another video for that, just kind of sort of specify on, like I say, very specific things that you want to hear about. Like I say, I have 0 problems with answering any questions that anybody has in regards to the game. Just let me know, and I'll go ahead and make a video for you. And if there's anything I missed, again, you can get in the comment section, let me know, and I got you. But until the next time, that's the video. Peace. Outro.